Can you mute yourself so I don't hear myself again? Thanks. It's super. So it's recording, all is good. So I'm starting over again. Sharing my screen. Yes. Okay, I feel a bit more comfortable now. So let's start over again. So today we here to talk about the Africa Manifesto for sustainable cities and the built environment. It's an overview for African leaders. My name is Tony Luen. I'm the founding chair of the GBCUG of Mauritius and also part of a couple of committees for World GBC, including the ARN, which is the Africa Regional Network. I'm joined today with Nasra Nanda. She's the newly appointed World GBC Africa Chairperson. She's also the CEO of the Kenya Green Building Society, and she's heading the Africa Regional Network. And Trudy Muwanga, she's the co-founder and director of GBC Uganda, and she's a member of a policy working group and other different committees of the Africa Regional Network. Mr. Danjuma Waniko, he's the president of GBC Nigeria, very engaged and involved in different other organizations. He's also a member of a global policy task force for World GBC. So Manifesto has been is the work that has been started probably about a year and a half ago. It took a good full year to have a manifesto because the process was also a lot of stakeholders engagement across Africa. So the 15 GBCs in Africa got together and created this manifesto for Africa with the stakeholders engagement across Africa, lots of consultations, focus groups, etc. So acknowledgement and support. We've been supported by the African Union as we are aligning with a 2063 vision. And there were regional partners, which is the Majid Al Futtaim and the DAR Group, who's been helping us financially. And the regional roundtable was sponsored by Arab and IFC, which is the World Bank. So a bit of context for Africa. A bit of context for Africa is that an estimated 70% of building stock has not been built yet by 2040. If you can please mute yourself, thank you. So the building infrastructure sector is worth 5.5 billion USD and expected to grow at a rate of 6.5% by 2024. And Africa is home to 1.4 billion people. So Africa is, I know we don't actually emit quite a lot compared to some of these countries, but we actually how do you say that, quite a big player because a lot of the buildings have not been built yet. And also we can leapfrog rather than going through steps in terms of technology or regulation, etc. So the Africa Manifesto is based on 5 themes, which is energy, water, materials, finance, and infrastructure. And we're going to start getting into each one of them. So in terms of energy, so how the Africa Manifesto has been set up, it's been giving a bit of context, and there are actually a set of policies that we think are the levers to get us to the position required for a sustainable city and sustainable built environment. So you can see on the screen, there's going to be for each theme, there's going to be slides, and you can see what other policies are. And then you know, my fellow panelists will be able to talk a bit more about this, to give you more what's going on on the continent, and also what is the thought about some of the policies that have been described in there. So as for energy, there's need to be obviously enactment and enforcement of green building policies to ensure buildings perform efficiently and appropriately for the climate. So that looks like in terms of building codes, etc. Set up building decarbonization targets, which is the NDCs, the national determined contributions. So basically these are linked to COP where each country will say, you know, what are the targets, and we need to also have targets specifically for building net zero carbon roadmap. A lot of us are working on that. To integrate smart grid technologies. We do understand that in Africa also we're not, not grids all smart. Increase obviously percentage share of renewable energy in our system, and to promote the installation of diverse and distributed renewable energy systems, meaning that's more decentralized. So my questions to my fellow panelists, maybe you can reintroduce yourself a little bit when you speak. I'll go for Nasra for energy. Can you maybe give some what's happening in Kenya and regarding to these policies, and where you are with building codes, and are you working on a net zero roadmap? Nasra?
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Yes, great. Thank you. Great.
Good morning, everyone.
Sharing there.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's my pleasure to join you all the way from Nairobi. Generally, when it comes to the energy conversation, I think to just give context really quickly, the manifesto was the attempt of the GBCs to provide the built environment of voice as a key partner in winning the climate conversation in the region. This is particularly important because often when African governments have been thinking about the climate conversation, at least from an East African perspective, the built environment was not considered intentionally in moving the agenda forward. From a Kenyan perspective, for example, Kenya is really strong in the renewable energy space, but we haven't had a chance to look at energy in the context of the built environment for a very long time. So I've been really happy to note the rapid progress we've made in the last few months. The first being the Kenya National Energy Efficiency Strategy, which looks at implementing energy efficiency in the context of the built environment. That's a key aspect that we're really happy to see. That was included as an intentional step towards the built environment. The second is the National Action Plan, which features energy efficiency in the context of the built environment as well. So we're gradually seeing energy efficiency being taken into consideration when we're looking at the built environment, which is key, especially when we look at the Africa Climate Summit, which is coming up, in the next few months, a month actually. This becomes really important because now at the Africa Climate Summit, we're seeing the built environment have its own track, and as a network, I think this is a key development, because it means then we have key aspects of the manifesto that can be really pushed and realized as a contributing factor to the outcomes of the Africa Climate Summit. So in matters energy, I think that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thanks, Nasra, for sharing on this. Energy, I think, is something that everyone's been working on, and I'm glad to hear also there's lots of things happening on your side with your government. And obviously, we are going to be looking closely in the Africa Regional Network on this theme. Trudy Muwanga, Trudy, all the way from Nigeria. Welcome. Yeah. And on your side, what is happening in your part of the world regarding energy policies? You're on mute, Rudy. 1 second. Let me just see if I can. Let me see if I can unmute you myself here. While I'm trying to unmute Trudy, if can you probably if you can also share with your colleagues when you link, because Trudy, I can't unmute you. Can you must unmute yourself. On top of your screen, there should be like a mic, MIC button.
We're good. All right. So
yeah,
hi.
lovely.
Hi.
Hi.
Right. So Trudy Muwanga. I'm from actually Uganda, so it's on the other side of the continent.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Danjuma. Yes. Danjuma is going to present from Nigeria. So basically, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak. With regards to energy, I'm going to Uganda are again just coming up to speed with regards to the built environment, the prioritizing and raising the we have had just recently a major conference with regards to hydro. Uganda, as you know, is, or you may not know, is 80% the electricity is dependent on hydro. So the nexus between those two issues is now becoming very, very clear. In particular, with the droughts and fluctuating levels in the lakes. So therefore, a lot more attention is being given to the matter. That aside, over the last 2 or 3 years, we've looked at the matter of what is actually in the codes. Uganda has gone through, and we as GBCUG, together with partners, have worked at assessing the gaps in terms of the national building codes and looking to green the codes. So there's a part 5 of the national codes which actually provides for energy efficiency and conservation. It was written with the intention of moving in that direction. Clearly, what has been ambition on our part has been to make sure that the specific metrics are put in, as opposed to having recommendations have been put forward, and we hope that when the consultations come through, we'll be able to come up with something very concrete that will move us towards the desired situation of having national building codes which actually specify building performance requirements vis-a-vis energy and also vis-a-vis water. Having said that, it's clear,
I'm so stressed.
yes. Maybe one thing I would point out at this stage is that as much as it's important to have the codes speaking to performance ratings or performance metrics, we also have to bear in mind that a lot of people are building and are not going through the process of being certified or going through the process of being approved. So there's also some work we've been doing with Makerere University in terms of making sure that people who are the uncertified builders do understand, as a matter of culture, as a matter of practice, the importance of energy efficiency in the long term.
Thank you, Trudy. So yeah, so for you, I mean, hydro is renewable. I understand also there's a problem with water levels, etc. I'm glad to hear also that maybe some consultation. I think for regulation and building codes, consultation is very important. I mean, if I look in Mauritius, our energy efficiency building code, we created it in 2010, and 2023 is not enacted yet. So because obviously that puts constraints on a lot of different involved the private sector, and then politically it's quite difficult to enact them. So good luck with that, and a real apology for mixing up Uganda and Nigeria. Yeah, Trudy is probably one of the oldest member of Africa Regional Network, and we've known each other for a very long time, and apologies for that. Danjuma, so Danjuma Waniko from Nigeria, you have this time. What is happening on your front regarding the policies regarding energy, in terms of maybe building codes or the roadmap in Nigeria? Because Nigeria is quite a big country, and I'm sure you use a lot of energy.
Yeah,
Danjuma, you
okay.
hear?
Thanks. Yeah, I hear you. Thank you so much for having me here, Tony. We are coming behind you guys. You guys have been GBCs for much longer than us, so we're trying to play catch up At the governmental level, there's quite a bit going on. We have a national bill, what we call the BEEC, Building and Energy Efficiency Code. It's not overly ambitious. It looks at it looks at lighting and cooling. I believe lighting, cooling, and water. There are 3 areas, but it's not very. And it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch policy. I'll come to that later. And the second challenge with that is that it is largely voluntary. It was and Nigeria is a federal country. Okay, let me give you that context. We are federal countries, so responsibility actually for building codes is domiciled at the subnational level. So it's nice for the federal government, the national government, to create a code, but then it now becomes a responsibility of the subnational governments to take it up and actually localize it and develop local codes around it, which is not happening very fast. We have movement in that regard in just one of our 37 subnational units now, that is Lagos. Of course, that is the biggest. It's about 20% of our economy, so it's a huge chunk of our energy consumption. That's good, but we still have the remaining 80% that is not really doing much on energy efficiency. So that's where we are. Good news, and okay, we have an energy transition plan, of course, under our COP Paris obligations, but there again, it's a bit limited. It doesn't directly look, it talks about improving energy efficiency, but it doesn't look at it too closely within the context of buildings. In the context of buildings, it's looking only at cooking fuels. So it doesn't look, so there too, we have scope to be a bit more ambitious. Now, coming to the good news, which is a good and bad. Like much of Africa, Nigeria suffers from a huge amount of energy poverty. We just don't have, we're not producing enough energy to meet the needs of our people. So we are plagued with blackouts, and one nice benefit of that, and also the freeing of our fuel prices, they were recently freed up. The subsidies were removed. One nice benefit of that is that it is pushing people not for altruistic reasons, but rather for commercial reasons towards home solar systems. So we see an unintended benefit of this. Energy poverty is not nice, but people have been self-providing in Nigeria for decades, but previously we relied on dirty diesel fuel generators. But with rising costs, our exchange rate issues, it now makes more sense for us now to get home solar systems to power most of our. So that is one of the areas, and the government, I must commend our government, is doing a lot in that area to encourage it. They have a scheme to provide home solar systems for about 1 million Nigerian homes. That too needs a bit more ambition, especially how to deal with redundancies and unused capacity. So we need to do a bit of thinking on that. What am I trying to say? For example, you live in a housing estate and everybody has a home solar system on their roof. Why don't we start thinking about hooking them up together so that maybe everybody doesn't have to have one, and maybe when you're using, I'm not using, we have surplus, things like that. So there's room for a bit more ambition, but there's been a bit of movement in energy efficiency in Nigeria. Thank you. I think that's about it.
Danjuma, for like a thorough analysis of Nigeria, and I think at least if you have codes for lighting and for HVAC, but in cooling, I think that's a big step. I mean, we don't even have that, and you can always build on that, and And we do understand also at one point that you've noticed that a lot of Africa is actually not even electrified. So there's energy poverty, which is a big issue. We tend to look at renewable energy and doing all this like energy efficiency policies, and then we forget that some parts of Africa we don't even have energy access. So I'm trying to see if Nasra is here. I know Nasra, she's at the conference and she's actually stepping out just to be able to speak with us. Nasra, are you here? Because then we'll take up your section. If not, we're just going to carry on. Nasra? And then again, please do share the link to your fellow colleagues who probably on the Google Meet. And if you're not a part of the panelists, you can ask you to remove your camera, so we can have a focus on the panelists. If you're not a panelist, can you just please remove your camera? That would be awesome. Thanks so much. And yeah, let's carry on with the different parts of the manifesto. So yes, we look at energy, and we heard about our different panelists. If you can, yeah, share. I know for my fellow colleagues, to our over colleagues at the Africa Journal Network, the Teams link would be awesome, Olu. Thanks so much. So looking at water, I think I'll leave the floor to Trudy. Trudy, maybe can you take us through the water theme, the water topic, one of the 5 pillars of the Africa Manifesto? And then can you maybe unpack this for us, Trudy?
I can. Hang on a minute. Just give me a minute. We're having a bit of a storm, so it's a bit unstable. I've got a notification.
Yeah. We don't mind you put your camera off. I'm just actually sharing my screen now, where the different policies are there. So yeah, carry on, Trudy.
So basically, what the manifesto, as we said, is an attempt to come to a common voice on issues that cut across Africa. With regards to water, to just contextualize it, we have to understand that it is it's central to life, and that appearances to the country notwithstanding, is very little of it. So we're talking about 71% of the Earth's surface is, water is covered. But 95% of that is actually salt water. 3.5% of that, the remaining 2.5% is fresh water, and much of it is actually locked up in ice. All right. So for the amount of water that exists in terms of groundwater, rivers, lakes, and streams, and everything else, there's little, basically 0.7%. So seen in this context, the limited and precious nature of freshwater becomes very, very clear. Now, for Uganda, the situation is, or would appear to be, blessed in many ways. Why? Because the country itself has rich reservoirs of water, fresh water. 18% of the total surface is covered. We have strong rainfall in 2 rainy seasons. And up to now, so we believed, we would not have been required or not necessarily have faced the challenges that many are facing now with regards to water. However, the abundance is misleading for a number of reasons, and I shall go into those really when we look at what the problems are. in essence, the rainwater and the rainfall is not consistent. Distribution is not even throughout the whole country. Some areas are arid and have suffered irrespective of rainfall. And the situation is compounded by the fact that we have climate change, we have a high level of growth in population, high level of growth in urbanization, and extreme degradation occurring as a result of forests being cut down for building for coal. And basically, we find ourselves in a situation which is not unprecedented and not unexpected, that Uganda is water now insecure. Despite the many blessings we had, the country is water insecure. So in that context, I want to go through what was discussed and what is actually being asked for in the manifesto. So the recommendations and the framework which is being put forward is to mandate water efficiency measures and appliances, water metering, and automated leak detection into building codes and standards. Well, that is actually a requirement which is foundational and essential in all contexts. The codes to integrate bioclimatic designs and water circularity principles. Well, basically, what we have found within the codes in Uganda and what has been done is that, as I said, there's a part 5, the National Building Standards Codes for management of water use, and have gone so far as to require, in some instances, the water harvesting, the use of water resources. However, we have also found that when it comes down to it, they do recommend the use of, when it comes to construction and building, the use of low flush, basically the fixtures that would reduce on consumption of water. All of this is recommended. However, it is not mandatory and it is not a requirement per se. So therefore, they need to embed these into the code is really important. The implementation of a net zero roadmap for all buildings, including formal and informal housing, the priorities as water reduction. Clearly, this is something that is still very much a desiderata in the Ugandan context. I've had a conversation with several people saying, well, you know, where are we in regards to this? Is this something that's going to happen? I'm hoping that as we move the dial with regards to the codes, as we move the requirements, as regards to codes and the metrics and the specifics, the targets set in the codes, then this will allow us to have a better view in terms of where it is we're supposed to go. As at now, I do not believe that we have a net zero water roadmap for all buildings. It is not something that has yet been created, but it's something definitely I'll be getting back onto and seeing if we can have a conversation around that and seeing how we can make that happen. With regards to the use, I mean, the other elements are basically to incentivize the use of potable water in buildings and incentivize the on-site reclamation and recycling of black water and grey water, rainwater recovery. Well, these are part and parcel of the whole idea of circularity. And when you consider that the country as a whole has not only gone through or is going through what seems to be a rinse and repeat cycle of extreme heat and then storms and, you know, rapid storm waters and everything else, it is important to see how that water that does come down can be captured, can be used, and can be in some shape or form to avoid the erosions and the pollution that it does and can cause. water infrastructure investments are needed as a fact. Again, this is a conversation that is ongoing. There have been, I believe, plans put in place, especially with regards to managing stormwater, where the issue has always come down to both access to land and being able to make the plans, realize the plans, and also access to funding, which is a problem in many cases. It has been a barrier to realizing what is essential in this particular context at this point. Gosh, have I lost you? Have I lost you? Gosh.
No, Trudy, we're here. We're all listening to you. We're all ears.
Okay,
so we do understand what we do. Yes, I know we hear.
Yes.
No.
I had basically what I wanted to say, and what I had hoped I'd be able to do, is to share some slides with you with regards to the upside of what's happened and things that are going on, and maybe that would require much longer conversation, in as much as a much more stable connection, because we've had storms all night, and so things are wavering, and I don't want to lose everybody. Bottom line, what has actually happened, and what I would like to share, is that whilst there are barriers, both in terms of the coordination of services, the coordination of actions by government bodies and other partners, whilst there is also a problem of funding, there is also an increasing desire and actions being taken by developers to see that they incorporate these principles in their developments as a process and as a practice. And that is really, really very good to see. Not just because it is, a step in the right direction, but also it sets up by in reality demonstrations where it is no longer a case of you can do X, Y, Z. You need to do X, Y, Z. It is being done, and it has been done. Today is what, Wednesday? Just this weekend, we had a Uganda Society of Architects annual summit, and one of the activities was a review and of projects around town. And I think that was a very, very inspired, a very good idea, because basically it did go to a project which I would like to discuss in detail, but can't, because I can't show you the pictures, which is the formerly called Lower Housing Project, the first eco district certified in Africa, and where there was an intentional and purposeful decision made very early on to incorporate these principles. So you do have a situation where in the planning of in creating the master plan, time was taken to understand where does the stormwater come from, where does it run, where and how can it be captured and then properly stored and used and recycled. The plans itself do provide for, again, the development does provide for a huge chunk of land, what is the backbone of the project, a park, you'd call it Central Park, which has been created as a means to receive and recycle and use some of that water. There is on site an actual facility was created to a facility was created for storage and yes. So basically, this is something which is actually taking place, and this is something which is actually happening. And for me, it's very good, because that was designed and planned, what, 10 years ago, and it's happening now. But at the end of the day, if more are doing it, it will be much better.
Yeah. So what I hear from you is some of these practices in terms of what we need to be using we need to mandate the use of low flow fixtures and energy water efficient sanitary wares, and that needs to be in the code because people are not actually using them. I'm not sure why, because that's quite mainstream now to have all these different things, low flow aerators. You mentioned also about circularity, and we need to rethink and do the water balance, and to rethink also how we can reuse the gray and the black water. And you've given also the importance of pilot projects where we can learn from, like the one you've given is using sustainable urban drainage system, which is nature-based solutions, where we'll capture the storm water and be able to reuse them. Thank you, Trudy. I do understand that you had some slides, but we, yes, we had some, carry on.
No, to clarify, I don't want to be misunderstood. I wasn't saying that people are not using low flow flushing systems or those requirements. They are being used, they are mainstream, and they are increasingly being taken up. Now, as to what the extent or rate of that is, one cannot determine. You'd have to get the data on it. All I can say is that I know that developers are now taking them up as a standard. What the base requirements in the codes may vary from what is actually being used, but operates at an individual level. And I think if you're looking at a country as a whole, where not everybody has access to water, not everybody has access to those facilities, then you'd want to see that there's a movement towards something that actually enables the majority of the population to tap into that process. And ultimately it's going to come down to developers, people who are creating the housing, who are creating the projects, and for people to buy or for people to rent. So that's why I felt it was important that developers are picking it up, and it's important it will get embedded as a requirement, not to mention ESG requirements and financing demands. So all of that kicks in and will play a part in making it a permanent requirement. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Trudy. For people who've joined us a little bit later, we had about a 15 minutes delay trying to sort out the technology. We couldn't record, etc. So we moved to Teams. Again, if you can share with your fellow colleagues the new link, I'm glad that we're recording this. So we'll be ending in about 15 minutes later. But if you have to go in about 20 minutes, that is okay. We'll be recording, but we'll go. We have another 40 minutes to go through the 3 different of the themes, and then to have a questions session, because we all also want to hear about your questions and whatever you need to know about the manifesto. So with that, thank you, Trudy. Thanks very much. Without further ado, we'll move to the next pillar, which is materials. Nasra, are you back here? I'm not sure is Nasra here. I can do finance for her, but if she's not back, then Danjuma, if you can unpack the materials theme.
Hi, Tony. Nasra had a different engagement to attend to, so
yes,
she left.
yes.
I think we can proceed.
Great. Yeah, she did mention so, but she had to she's busy in a conference at the moment. And no problem. I'll look at finance myself. Thanks so much. Yes, materials, Danjuma. Can you provide us a little bit of an overview on the materials policies, and also share a bit of your experience and regarding the policies and materials?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Tony. Well, the materials pillar of the manifesto is focused really on promoting circularity, reducing resource footprints, and encouraging recovery and reuse. That is reducing the demand for virgin natural resources, and also reducing the amount of waste that goes to landfills and that pollutes the environment. In that context, in Nigeria, I think we have a lot of activity, circular economy activity going on in Nigeria, but it hasn't really penetrated the built environment sector. So the sector continues to be a huge drain on natural resources. And this is a problem for us and for actually the rest of Africa in view of our urban growth. We all know that our urban footprints are set to double in the next 2.5 decades. That's a huge amount of resources. In Nigeria, our cement consumption is anticipated to triple by 2050. So this lack of circularity is a major problem for us. And I think there are a number of reasons for that, which will probably be the same in most of our other African countries. I think number one is the lack of the infrastructure. What do I mean by infrastructure? Even as a person in my home, if I want to recycle, I don't know how. I don't have a recycling bin. I don't have anywhere to take it to. This same thing for the built environment. We don't have an infrastructure or a system or a framework in place that enables or incentivizes these kind of behaviors. And so because of the natural human inertia to change, it makes it more difficult for us to get going circular-wise. The second barrier we see in Nigeria and probably for most of the rest of Africa is also the capacity. Most of our built environment professionals don't have the needed knowledge or, or understanding to implement circular design principles into their buildings. And I think those are the main barriers to circularity. Of course, we also have change resistance. Change resistance is also a problem. And then there is the issue of even if you limited scale, there is a lot, like I said, there's quite a bit of circular activity, especially around plastics. There are quite a few people making plastic bricks and things like that in Nigeria, or using supplementary cementitious materials to reduce cement consumption, but they are mainly small operations and they lack scale, and they also lack the necessary certification. So that gives a bit of pause to people who may want to use them because they don't have approvals from our standards authority. So those are some of the issues that are acting as barriers in Nigeria in the materials area. But regarding materials, more important in Nigeria is the issue of quality. We have a huge problem with low quality materials. I think that is the last track here, penalize the use of commonly used red list building materials. Going beyond red lists, we have a huge problem of people bringing in cheap, unsafe materials from abroad and incorporating them into buildings in Nigeria, which is creating problems. We have a huge problem with building collapses. And aside that, we also have problems with indoor environmental quality where people are perpetually ill and they cannot find a reason for that illness. And they keep, for example, in Nigeria, you find people saying they have malaria every day, and I'm puzzled because, I mean, it's just not feasible. If you have one incidence of malaria, for those of us who have a bit of knowledge about it, you have a bit of immunity for a couple of months or more, natural immunity. So keep coming down with malaria week after week after week. You need to look at where you live. So we have that problem of quality of building materials. So that takes us back to the issue of regulations. We actually have strong regulations in Nigeria. The problem is enforcement. So I think I'll pause there, Tony. I think I've said enough. So regulatory enforcement, barriers to circularity, poor quality building materials. Thank you.
Thanks very much to provide like a good picture also to understand. I suppose enforcement is not just unique to Nigeria. Yes, we do have regulations and we push for regulations, but then, you know, the compliance enforcement is to follow. And a lot of time, our authorities are already very busy with things or understaffed. But we can't do that, and also sometimes also when we talk about enforcement is just like a little slap onto the hand, and then that's it. So I think that the sometime where there's with how do you say that, the punitive measure is not strong enough also when we look at some of people who are illegal, and um, when coming back to the indoor air quality and the type of materials, that's very also very, how do you say that, African centric, because everything is about cost. We are developing countries or underdeveloped where cost is important. So unfortunately, that means that we get, so the people are looking at cheaper material to make housing more affordable, or spaces more affordable. And so I think for that, what do you think, Danjuma, is a bit of some solution about regulation? Are there any organizations doing some awareness and knowledge campaign regarding, you know, the impacts of materials, either on health, either on their environmental impact content? Is there anything like this happening in your part of the world?
Well, there is awareness. The problem is where that awareness is targeted. Now, a large proportion of our construction is not in what I would term the formal sector. We have a lot of construction that is self-built at very small scale. Now, these people, the people who do this kind of buildings, they don't really benefit from, for example, we wouldn't find them here. So how do we reach them is an issue that we need to tackle with. There's a lot of talk. We have a lot of seminars, webinars, events, but it's targeted at people like me operating in the formal side of the construction sector. So at that level, we are aware. But the man who is building his little house a block at a time, he really doesn't know that this material, for example, is dangerous. He doesn't know how to differentiate between a good material and a bad material, and he doesn't benefit from events like this. So I think awareness, we need to recalibrate it a bit and make it a bit more targeted.
Yeah, I get you. And I do note also the challenge of where, if you want to recycle, how do you recycle? Who actually are the people taking whatever, your plastic, your paper? What I've seen that works well, I'm currently in France at the moment. We have these centers where you go and drop everything, and there they segregate and then they redistribute, etc. Obviously, it's more advanced with the bins, etc. But in Mauritius, we're starting doing that, and also now we have centers where everyone can go and drop whatever needs to be, it's called a déchetterie. So you can go and, you know, give anything. And obviously, if we're doing like segregation on the site, then what makes it easier. Thanks so much for that, Danjuma. I'll move to the next.
Okay, let me just jump in there. So honestly, that really makes it easier. For example, coming back to a personal level, my waste collection, for example, if we had differential pricing, if the municipal authority charged those who didn't segregate their waste different from those who did, then that could facilitate and encourage waste sorting. So we need to start looking at these little, I think they're called nudges that encourage that shift behavior in a desired direction in Africa.
Yes,
Tony,
yes.
Thank you. May I also jump in there? Sorry.
Yes, Trudy. Yeah.
Materials. Actually, I know it's not my segment, but I felt it's important to point out two things. One, with regards to the waste collection, Uganda does have a good system that is in place and has been in place for a long time. The issue has been in terms of how to grow it and how to extend the services beyond the immediate residential areas. Secondly, when the matter of materials and people changing, buying cheap and nasty and often, unhealthy materials, we have to understand the context in which we're operating. And for many people who I have spoken to, and that is both at the professional level and right down to the community level. To contextualize, Uganda has a local community structure whereby you have a local authority, local authorities, municipal councils, but they also have at a village level and a parish level small secretariats and local council chairman and his team. So at that level, it is much easier to understand why people are resisting or sometimes not willing to take up materials, or why they use what they use. And one of the issues that has come up is basically a lot of people see the idea of wood or bamboo as being not modern. Imprint is still very strong in the idea that basically only these things are supposed to be modern. Having said that, a lot more projects are being taken, a lot of adventures and really, really good projects are being taking place with regards to using these alternative materials. One is a school, teachers' school in Cairo, where they've got bamboo used extensively. Others, we've got a rammed earth project coming up here, and all sorts of experimentation is going on with different people and different developers to see how they can change and reconfigure what is the standard materials. The most exciting one I've seen actually really has been a decision and movement by a local entrepreneur and to produce and green concrete, eco concrete here locally, dealing with the issue both of decarbonization at a local level and also helping us to start a conversation around decarbonization in the whole life cycle. So that is quite important for us. With regards to the self-build, Danjuma, again, I've had a lot of experience in talking to people at that level because we had to convince them that green building makes sense. And sometimes it's a question of messaging, sometimes it's a question of language and the message. And ultimately, when you focus on the health aspect and less on the rest of it, they do tend to buy in and understand it. With regards to the builders, we have, as I said, we have a program where we've been working with university and working with the unlicensed builders, the uncertified practitioners who do the majority of the building, supporting self-builders. And that has also proven to be very important in terms of inculcating them into the ideas and principles of circularity, of managing waste and water on site, and the benefits that come out of borrowing from or taking on these principles, both in terms of time and cost. That's it.
Thanks, Trudy. Yeah, so I think as we know, if you look at building industry, it's the most sort of how do you say that, ancestral in the way we build, and anything new, we build new materials, etc. Even if we've used it a long time ago, it's very difficult. I mean, if you look at how we do buildings, we take years to do one building, where now, industrialization, we do like, millions of thousands of cars in one day. Yeah, so I think this I want to mention because it's a difficult industry to do change. Even we talk about new technology, new solutions, and it's very difficult for it to get into the mainstream. And I think what Danjuma was meaning is that we reach the professionals. That's very easy to reach. But when we get to the person who is a bit more remote, not connected to the ecosystem, who needs to be touched, we can't reach them, even if material is in different language and properly framed for them. We just can't reach them. So I think that wasn't noticed. So I'm worried about time. So I'm going to go through the finance part and then the infrastructure, and then we're going to have like 15 minutes to talk about questions and comments. So regarding finance, if you can see my screen, so in finance, we need to develop a common international taxonomy for sustainable finance. So I want to give a bit of context here. Finance is something which is very important, and there's actually lots of money being put now in what in everything but sustainability or green, etc. And even in the corporate world, there's a lot of things happening in terms of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, where more and more finance are going to be directed to environmental and social impact. So the issue that we have in terms of a built environment and sustainability is how we direct it to some of these initiatives and how we can access this finance, because even if you look at COP, I think 100 billion has been pledged yearly, to help the global south. That's a lot of money. And how do we do that? A lot of time when we try to get the green climate finance, it takes years, and even just for an entity to be accredited to get that money, that also takes 1 year or two. And why climate change is a problem that we need to resolve very quickly. So these are around the policies for finance. There are a lot of things that needs to be done, which is like an international taxonomy for sustainable finance, decrease the barriers to the sustainable finance, because a lot of time also the financing goes to the government, and how can it, like trickle down to the private sector or big organization like the World Green Council? How can we do that? Because we do understand also sometimes in some government, we get the fund, and then maybe it gets into a bigger fund and then it's used for something else. So we don't know what all of these things, how it all works. And we want to be able to also to maybe directly provide the money in a way to the people who needs it, rather than going through lots of intermediaries. And then what we have looked at also is how we can use green building certification, which is a token of quality. How we can link that to money. There has been some things done by IFC, I think in Kenya. There's some other programs done by the French bank where you get cash back on your investments. So how do we actually, and what we found was the difficulty to link finance with these projects. So the bankers, how do they evaluate if this project is green or not? So we want to make the certification like a proxy to say, okay, the building is certified, give them the money. You don't need to spend lots of time to look at it because we have looked at it already, or the organization giving the certification. Okay, then there's this whole thing about blended finance. So it's another field for unlocking money. Obviously, when we take a loan, there's a risk. So blended finance, what it means that obviously the lower layer is the risky part. So if you take a loan of 1 million, then maybe you might be how do you say that, fail on 200,000. Then that first part is guaranteed by an organization. So then it's about de-risking, and the over 800,000 that's been loaned, we have less risk because the 200,000 is the risk taken by the first person or first organization. Normally, it's probably the government, etc. And then we can unlock private sector money. We talk about that, the green mortgages also, and the de-risking. So this is about finance. I'm open to some questions, or maybe Trudy or Danjuma, do you want to come in here regarding finance? Okay. But please do ask your questions, and Olu is tracking any questions that you have on some of his themes. So the last theme that we looked at now, we're looking at is infrastructure. Trudy, Danjuma, do you want to mention to Danjuma? Do you want to take this and give an overview on infrastructure? Or if you want to, I can do it.
Well, infrastructure, of course, the manifesto is looking at infrastructure is a major problem in Africa, and Nigeria is not an exception. In fact, I think we're worse than most of our peer countries. I was looking at a report, I think it's the Africa Infrastructure Development Index, and it says we rank 24th out of 54 African countries in terms of our quality of our infrastructure. So that surprised me a bit. I thought would rank higher. So the infrastructure track in the manifesto is actually trying to ensure that take an integrated approach to buildings and infrastructure. And also, I think one of the key aspects of the infrastructure is to ensure a balance is to move us away from this wholesale paving of our cities, especially within the context of urban heat islands, and increase the flood risk from high precipitation events, and encourage more green infrastructure in our cities and blue infrastructure to attenuate rain, flood water, and then to cool our cities. In Nigeria, I would say that our experience is mixed. We have laws in place that mandate minimum amounts of green spaces, for example, in development and things like that. But then, of course, we come back to the problem of enforcement. Yes, it's there in paper, but you find that a few months or years down the line, somebody comes and buys up the land that's supposed to be green and builds it up. So that benefit is lost. So we need to do a lot of work on infrastructure in Africa and in Nigeria. I think the first thing would probably be to look at our regulations and how they are enforced, and to create incentives for people to behave themselves. Sometimes punishments are good, but we talk about stick and carrot. What do I mean by incentives? Perhaps city authorities could consider, okay, if you maintain a certain proportion of unbuilt area or green space in your development, I'll give you an X% discount on your planning fees. Things like that may encourage better planning. And then, of course, there's one of the problems we have is, of course, lack of money. We don't have the money to invest in the kind of infrastructure we want. So in Nigeria, we have been promoting PPP solutions to developing infrastructure, but those have really been focused on the mega projects like bridges, roads, and things like that, and not really at micro infrastructures within cities. But it's still a move in the right direction. Another area where Nigeria is looking at is in the area of using green bonds as green finance to raise money for public infrastructure. So we just raised a green bond, I think, last year, sovereign green bond, and we're using it for some infrastructure projects. So for infrastructure, I think we're not doing badly, but we still have a lot we need to do. Okay, let me also add that one area we need to work on as professionals and stakeholders is this area collaboration. There is a disconnect between the different planning layers or planning levels when it comes to infrastructure development, especially in countries like Nigeria, where responsibilities are split between the national and the subnational levels. So that can create a bit of problems. So here we need to work to improve coordination and collaboration between the different levels. So I think for infrastructure, like I said, doing well, but we still have a lot to do. Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to note something here, what you're saying. When we look also at nature-based solutions, that actually is cheaper than hard infrastructure. I see a lot of that being done in our country now also, where we use swales, retention basins, etc., to storm water rather than those big concrete pipes we used to have before, which then cause flooding somewhere else. Also, I want to check with both of you or any person, because I want to give a floor also to hear about your experience, the people who are in the room, for your questions or even your comment, or you might be from a different country, about all these 5 topics we talk on. Is using of technology also in terms of infrastructure, because, for example, in many countries, water leak is a big thing. Like I'm not sure for Mauritius what it is, but it's a lot. It's like in some countries like 50% of the water. But we're saying, okay, let's save water and whatever. But then all the pipes are leaking in different places of the country, and 50% of the potable water is actually going in leaks. So then you got smart technology today to detect leaks, etc. There's all these things about technology which we didn't touch so much upon, and are there smart cities? Are there smart technology being used in your country? I want to hear that. So we got 20 minutes left, and I would love to hear from whoever wants to take the floor. Either you have a question or you want to mention something. Olu, I want to ask you if there are any questions yet into the chat. Yeah.
Can I just interject at that point and add another comment with regards to infrastructure? So we have it's estimated about 40% of Kampala population lives in informal settlements, predominantly developed near the wetlands. And by and large, this is and continues to be a problem, especially as the country, as the population is growing, and more people are moving from the rural areas to the urban centers, which are growing rapidly. Now, one of the key issues that we have, and that we found to be a factor or a barrier to proper planning and cooperation, obviously planning is required, is land tenure. Land tenure and the availability of, or the government's ownership of land, of enough land to be able to do what they would like to do. So very often they have a plan, as they do have in regards to Kampala city, capital city authorities, for climate action, for greening, but they have to acquire the land, all too often constrained by financial. So land tenure is a major issue and a major barrier for us here, for most people within the Ugandan context. The other issue, of course, also is the mindset, the idea that if you're building a house, you have to pave everything, and the consideration as to what you're going to do with that water doesn't come into play. It is people build, they put they direct the water off their site and don't think about where it's going to go. That requires a lot more interaction and a lot more intervention, a lot more information and knowledge sharing, but also a cultural change, both in practice at the professional level and at the level of people who are consuming the services of professionals. Because in the end, the water has to stop somewhere, and we all suffer when it doesn't have any kind of pre-planned arrangement.
Thank you, Trudy, for sharing on what the issue is in Uganda. So I will give the floor to Nasra. I hope I'm Saruni. I hope I'm saying your name properly. The floor is yours. You can unmute yourself and intervene.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the session. It was very, very much interesting, and the knowledge shared was very important on my end. For me, it's less of a question, but can end up as a question in how can we do it, is just borrowing as we go forward as the continent, is that we need to borrow what has worked in other sectors as they are rolling out new policies, new plans, new innovations, especially something like health, education, and finance. They use human-centered design to implement and contextualize their various approaches. So what, for example, we can have a regional approach, but what works in Accra or somewhere else like in Nairobi might not work because there might be different players or actors along the value chain. What is a low-hanging fruit there is not a low-hanging fruit somewhere else. Just as you said, electricity in, for example, Tanzania is not the same electrical grid in South Africa, and just contextualizing will assist us to understand what are the different, even bringing in other things like social and behavioral change. How do they affect people? Because we can continue pushing without really trying to understand the end users, and then not understand why things are not working. So it is a comment, but in the question is also, how can we do that? And how can we lean in so that we're not constantly preaching to the choir? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your comment. That's very true. And I think those are the don'ts that we need for any transition, is to just cut and paste. We need to be quite specific to our country. We're very aware of that in our discussion at the ARN. I mean, to create the manifesto, it's a broad paint stroke of different policies that we are actually at the ARN and World GBC seeing that needs to be done. And then obviously that needs to be contextualized to the country, wherever you are in terms of your code, your policies, etc. And definitely the human-centric design for anything. I mean, that's what the stance we've taken. That's why there's been so many different roundtables across Africa. And yes, we had to do the thing for the continent. So we did a lot of consultation and stakeholders engagement as part of doing like some design thinking. And a lot of time also that we always say is that all these different, even the manifesto needs to be quite reviewed, regularly, and to be quite agile regarding that. Just give me a second, sorry. I really apologize for that. I should have put this off.
If I may jump in there, the points that Nasra has made were really valid, as are the ones that you've just made. The issue of context and contextualization is very key, and I think for all those people that have been introduced to and will, from this time going forward, look at the manifesto. The idea is to understand that in a certain respect, it is a common, voice and raised ambitions for Africa as a continent. So it's not saying that it's one thing for everybody. It's not a one-size-fits-all document. That's the first thing. Secondly, in providing a stretch, there was a very clear understanding at the beginning that as much as the whole world is going through a period of transition, the whole world is having to deal with the issue of climate change and try to prioritize and raise the profile of the built environment. Within the African context, there are certain particular there's a band of issues that are recurring and interrelated that need to kind of be dealt with. And the elements that have been put there are the core elements. So we all have the same problem, but it's the pressure points differ as between different countries. So that is the critical part. I think that's important to understand. And it's a very interesting exercise that we're going through here, because I'm thinking maybe what I'll do is take the manifesto in total and see how we can actually take it even further down and look at it at the different levels, whether nationally, and then take it at a district level. So that's an interesting follow-up conversation. I'm sure I'll share with you when the time comes.
Thank you, Trudy. Thank you so much. I just wanted to also, mention when you talk about preaching to the choir, and I think that's what Danjuma mentioned also. A lot of time we see ourselves within the fully convinced, people or community. We just all just talking to each other, and that's why we decided to do some of this webinar. That's why I really wanted to record this. You can also share it to different people, but is not probably well versed with all of this, and that's the idea about the manifesto, is to really spread the different sort of tracks and concepts and strategies, but that's possible. We now at the end of our session. I would I can also give a floor to anyone else who wants to say something before we end up. On your side, if not, then gives the final words to Trudy, and then to Danjuma, and then to Olu, who's our regional coordinator, to say a couple of words before we wrap up. Yeah, Danjuma, any last word from you?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Tony, for having us. I think I'll just add my voice to what the last few of you have said regarding contextualization and the need to localize these policies and make sure that they are relevant, and to really take them down as far as possible, down, especially to the informal settlements. How do they translate? Because we have a huge problem. Trudy mentioned 40% in Abuja, our capital. Actually, 50% of 50% live in slums, according to most recent statistics. So that needs to be done. And I also want to say that the manifesto is, the slogan is the Africa we want. So it's more of a vision than what we are or where we are. So it's telling us this is where we want to be. This is how we see ourselves in 20, 30 years. And now we have to take that and develop a pathway. It's now saying, to get from here to there, why don't we consider doing A, B, C, D? So it's a vision, and it's important that we have a vision, as difficult as it is, as impossible as it may sometimes seem. It's good to have a vision to inspire you, to tell you where you want to go, so that so that we're all moving in the same direction. You're not going in Mauritius, you're not going one way, and in Nigeria, I'm going another. We are working towards a common purpose, and then we have something to inspire us and to energize us. So thank you so much for organizing this. And I think we need to continue having this conversation. And as we said, maybe look for a way to take this conversation really down to the informal level and talk to them and even hear from them, because there are solutions out there at the informal scale that we may not be aware of, that we could take and bring to this our formal organized structure and see really great improvements. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Danjuma. For this Africa we want, and it's true, informal settlement also is where the ideas flow. And if you talk about circularity, our travel into India and some poor area of India, they master circularity. Thanks. Yeah, Trudy, please.
My final comments will be that in the context of contextualization, we need to localize, which is, I think, the point that Danjuma has made. Localize. There really is an important need to look at how the ideas we are propounding break down and what they mean on the local ground, on the ground. That's the first part. Secondly, there's the issue that in the context of trying to contextualize and to localize, there has to be collaboration. One thing that I'm a lawyer by profession, and so therefore I'm coming at this from slightly outside the architects, engineers, professional the quintessential built environment professionals lens. But the number of people who've said to me, "Oh, but why are you doing this? You're not an architect. Why are you involved in this? You're not an engineer." Which, you know what I mean? There's a sense of territoriality when it comes to matters to do with the built environment. Whereas the reality is, post-COVID, it's, all bets are off. Everybody's involved. You all need to get involved. So it has to be properly understood by the professionals and the people, allied industries, whether they're insurers or bankers or whatever, that everyone has to have a say, because if they don't, things cannot work. There has to be joined up thinking and joined up money. Thirdly, the whole idea of a healthy, resilient community requires everybody, and that is from the top to the middle to the bottom. And that is, again, the idea of, talk to the people who aren't on the webinars, talk to the people. And the thing is, it's not really very difficult, not very they're the neighbors, or your, the old people's neighbors, or, when you go to see your grandma, or you see people in the village, they're there, they're there. You get a sense of exactly who they are and what they do and what they think. Yeah, ultimately, again, I'll say thank you very much for allowing us to participate in this conversation. It's one that is going to run on and on and on and on, and I'm more than happy to engage at any point. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. So yeah, I mean, what's a very important point, collaboration, multi-stakeholder, multi-sector, and I think this is also, we talk a lot about it, is actually how do we do this? What is collaboration? How do you do that? How do you get people to talk to each other? How do you align, vision? Because we do all have different objectives, and then yeah, and then to spread the word. But on that, I want to say something. It's about the bell curve. So you always have people who are pioneers, avant-garde, and right at the cutting edge of it, and probably that's the African green building leaders. And then you will have on the other hand people that even you speak to them, they will actually not be interested. And then you have a mass in the middle of a bell curve. But these people, they will only do something if someone else who are further around the curve has done it. So a lot of time also we need to be able to target our message to the people who want to hear, and they will in turn pull the people. If you want to reach the mass, the mass won't do it if someone else hasn't done it. So there's no point of speaking to them because it'd be a waste of time. If you look at the bell curve statistics, and we do that. So really champions need to pull it, and I think the champions are here in the room, and you are the people that needs to share this vision and to pull the mass, because the mass will only be pulled because someone else has told them about it. And if we directly try to get them, we won't get them. So it's you to be able to influence your different policymakers, different industry, different actors, and different stakeholders that you're in touch with. Olu, a word from you, because I did mention your name a few times. I want you to introduce yourself and say last word. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Hello, hi everyone. My name is Ola Diambo. I am the Africa Advocacy Programs Officer at the World Green Building Council, and my main task is to support the Africa Regional Network of the World Green Building Council. Maybe I can just say a few things about the World Green Building Council as I close off. So ideally, for those who are joining us today or have not interacted with us, just to let you know that the World Green Building Council is ideally the largest and most influential local, regional, global action network, leading transformation to sustainable carbonized built environments for everyone. And around the world, we are approximately 75 plus green building councils and industry partners from all parts of the world. And we work to drive systemic change in 3 areas. Number 1, address whole life carbon emission of existing and new buildings. Number 2, enable resilient, healthy, places. 3, secure, regenerative, resource efficient, and waste-free built environments. And just to mention, in Africa, we have a total, we have the Africa Regional Network, which is comprised of a total of 15 GBCs. And one of our key priorities is the Africa Manifesto that I've shared in the link and has been the key focus of our discussion today. We welcome everyone to have a look at the Africa Manifesto, and we also welcome you to come on board and partner with us and see how we can work together to effectively fulfill the asks of the manifesto. There's been a lot of discussion. Almost all speakers have discussed the need for collaboration, the need to go back to people, and the need to go to the ground and speak to everyone, not only the people who can attend webinars, but everyone else, to have a people-centered approach. So I'll just leave my contacts in the chat for anyone who is interested to work with or partner with the Africa Regional Network. Please feel free to contact us. We have a vast network and we are happy to work together to drive change, looking at the Africa we want. Thank you so much, Tony. Back to you.
Thank you, Olu. I want to close off by saying a big thank you for you for showing up. I mean, showing up is the first thing that we all need to do. And yeah, and thanks for your time, and thanks for also your indulgence of the issue we had and be running late with our program and having to move from one platform to the other. And thank you so much. And I hope that we see you again in the next webinar around the manifesto. I think what we'll do is we will be looking at different panelists from different world, but we shall be able to unpack more of this and to have further discussions. And yeah, so can you I think Danjuma, you wanted to say something? Danjuma, you wanted to say something?
No, that's fine.
I see your hand was up.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's all right, Tony. I'm fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a beautiful day. And we'll see you again next time. All the very best. We'll share, whoever is registered in Eventbrite to your email, we'll share the link to the recording. And then I'm sure we'll put it also in our the World GBC site. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.